Well, welcome to the 700 Club. Get ready for a real shocker. Your tax dollars, that's right, yours, may have funded research that started the coronavirus pandemic. That's right. It's called gain-of-function research, and it was conducted in the Wuhan Institute of Virology in late 2019. Scientists are calling for a new investigation, and lawmakers on Capitol Hill are demanding answers. Laurie Johnson brings us the stunning details.
Gain-of-function research is when scientists manipulate a virus to do more than it usually does. For example, causing a virus that usually infects only animals to infect humans. This type of research can be used to develop cures and vaccines or biological warfare. The Wuhan Institute of Virology reportedly conducted gain-of-function research on coronaviruses in late 2019. That's about the same time when dozens in the Wuhan area began to fall ill. Streets near the institute were then quickly closed. Nevertheless, a World Health Organization team concluded a laboratory origin of the pandemic was extremely unlikely and animal-to-human infection very likely. Now, months later, 18 scientists want a new investigation. In a letter published in the journal Science, they write, theories of accidental release from a lab and zoonotic spillover both remain viable. On Capitol Hill, lawmakers also demanding answers about whether American taxpayers funded this gain-of-function research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
Dr. Fauci, do you still support funding of the NIH funding of the lab in Wuhan?
Senator Paul, with all due respect, you are entirely and completely incorrect that the NIH has not ever and does not now fund gain-of-function research in the Wuhan Institute.
Government scientists like yourself who favor gain-of-function research.
I don't favor gain-of-function research in China. You are saying things that are not correct.
Ranking Intelligence Committee member Devin Nunes disputes Dr. Fauci's assertion. Nunes says as gain-of-function research stopped in the U.S., the National Institutes of Health gave millions to the nonprofit EcoHealth Alliance, a portion of which then went to the Wuhan lab.
When it was banned here in the U.S. or put on pause, the Wuhan research was continuing and likely with U.S. dollars that we still don't have an accounting for.
NIH Director Dr. Francis Collins said the agency never approved funding that supported gain-of-function research, but did admit we can't absolutely prevent somebody who has an intention of deceiving us about how they've used the funds. EcoHealth Alliance President Peter Daszak describes their research.
And we've now found, after 6 or 7 years of doing this, over 100 new SARS-related coronaviruses, very close to SARS. Some of them get into human cells in the lab. Some of them can cause SARS disease in humanized mouse models and are untreatable with therapeutic monoclonals, and you can't vaccinate against them with the vaccine. So these are a clear and present danger.
Daszak was part of the WHO team that determined the pandemic likely began from animal to human transmission, not a lab leak. Some say his ties to the Wuhan lab present a conflict of interest. So while there's no evidence to prove the pandemic began in a Chinese lab, pressure mounts for a more rigorous investigation than before, to include whether the U.S. may have played a role.
Isn't that a shocking story? Isn't it horrifying that Fauci and his crew actually paid the money to develop the virus that has destroyed the world? Well, Laurie Johnson is with us now for the link to the Wuhan lab. And why would the U.S. fund research at the Wuhan lab?
Pat, it's because of the coronavirus research they do. They look at the coronaviruses that are in bats found in caves in China. And the reason the United States is interested in this, it began in 2003 with the SARS outbreak, when one of these coronaviruses went from a bat from a Chinese cave into a person. 8,000 people were infected. 800 people died. That's a 10% death rate. And so what it turns out is these bats in China carry hundreds of coronaviruses. And so the United States wants to know, naturally, more about these coronaviruses, particularly how they may impact human health.
Well, Lauren, but they went beyond that to this so-called gain of function. So they take some bugs from the bats, with the bat dropping or back blood, and then they want to manipulate it. And that is where we get this terrible coronavirus that's affecting the world. Am I right with that?
Well, that's actually a theory, and many people call it a conspiracy theory. So there isn't the evidence, there isn't proof that that's exactly what happened, but there is a lot of circumstantial evidence. And so, for example, the House House Republicans on the Intelligence Committee are releasing a report as early as this week that may detail some of that circumstantial evidence. And Pat, they also wrote a letter to President Biden last Friday demanding that he release intelligence that they believe the Biden administration is sitting on regarding the origins of the coronavirus, including a report that the State Department reportedly received in May of 2020 that says that Chinese military scientists were developing bioweapons with coronaviruses as early as 5 years ago. So more calls for investigations regarding the origins of this virus are coming from all sectors.
Well, you know, President Trump was beat up. He kept calling it the Chinese virus, and everybody just laughed at him, or it's your fault. And suddenly the U.S., our economy, this thing has disrupted the economy of the United States in a horrible way, cost us trillions of dollars, and the death toll around the world for this one virus is in the tens of millions now, isn't it?
It's about 3 million deaths. And so it's true, and we need to get to the bottom of this. How did it originate? The WHO report was inconclusive. Everyone agrees on that. And most people agree that further investigation needs to be done on both theories, whether it went from bat to human, which has been unproven, or whether it escaped from a lab, which is also unproven.
Last question. Are we still doing gain of function research here in America?
Gain-of-function research in the United States was paused in 2014 during the Obama administration, and that pause was lifted in 2017 during the Trump administration. There are reports that gain-of-function research has been done in North Carolina and may be continuing even now, although there is some question about whether that research actually fits the definition of gain-of-function research.
Lori, thank you for your insights. Well, in other news, a tougher line on Israel. That's what the Biden administration is now taking after pressure from more Democrats. So what happened when a member of the so-called squad confronted the president about his support for our dear friends in Israel? John Jessup has more.
That's right, Pat. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians in Israel took to the streets to protest the military response to the ongoing rocket attacks from Gaza. Violence breaking out in the West Bank with hundreds wounded and 4 dead. In Gaza, Israeli Defense Forces struck Hamas leaders and military targets as terrorists continue to launch rockets into southern Israel. The Biden administration not yet explicitly joining the global calls for ceasefire. However, White House officials say the president is taking a firm line, warning Benjamin Netanyahu that he can't hold off the international community much longer. Meanwhile, the president faces divisions in his own party, another sign yesterday when Michigan Democrat Representative Rashida Tlaib confronted the president during his visit to Detroit, reportedly criticizing his support for Netanyahu's government in an 8-minute talk on the airport tarmac. Well, protests in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, after district attorney announced sheriff's deputies won't face charges in the shooting death of Andrew Brown Jr., a black man. The DA calling Brown's death tragic but justified. Police body cam footage showing deputies surrounding Brown's car as they served warrants related to felony drug charges. One deputy grabs the door handle. That's when Brown puts the car in reverse. The DA says he ignored the deputy's commands and hit one with the car. 3 deputies opened fire. Brown died from a gunshot wound to the back of the head. His family calling his death an execution and the decision not to charge the officers a slap in the face.
At no point was Andrew Brown Jr. Using his vehicle as a weapon. No officers were injured. No officers were knocked down. In fact, at every point, he was moving his vehicle away from officers.
When you employ a car in a manner that puts officers' lives in danger, that is a threat. And I don't care what direction you're going.
And Pat, the FBI is pursuing a federal civil rights probe into the killing.
You know, it's amazing. They went immediately on the air, the defense, and said it was an execution, it was a contract killing, it was a horrible thing. And then we have to wait a couple of weeks, and then suddenly here's the video. The guy wasn't just sitting in his car peacefully. The officers came and started shooting him. And they said he was shot many times. He was only shot twice. And the truth is, he tried to run the officers down. And once you get the video, and when I was on this program talking a couple of weeks ago, I said, they ought to release the video immediately. But the lie goes out there that the police executed an unarmed black man sitting in his car peaceably. That wasn't the case. He was using his car as a weapon and tried to run the police down several times. And then finally, but they only shot him twice. And of course, the second bullet was what killed him. But nevertheless, the police were justified in trying to defend themselves. So we have to get the truth. And there's so many lies out in the media all the time. And it reinforces the narrative that the police are bad, we need to defund the police and so forth. And then the communities where those police have been defunded are now beginning to say, but we're having an influx of crime that we've never had before. We've got to get the police back. And many wonderful officers who've been in the police forces are resigning all across the country because what's being done to them. But this thing in Elizabeth City was just one example of how the media picks up the narrative that these police are terrible and we got to defund the police. And then suddenly we have it's a crime wave in every single city, murder and arson and other kinds of crimes have gone up dramatically during this period of time. John?
Pat, turning to severe weather, heavy storms assaulting Louisiana and Texas this week left entire neighborhoods submerged in Lake Charles, Louisiana, after a foot of rain fell. Parents had to wade through waist-high water to take their children to safety, with emergency workers and Good Samaritans carrying out more than 150 rescues. Meanwhile, more than 20 tornadoes have been reported between Texas and Wyoming. Fortunately, little damage reported from those twisters. Pat?
Well, it's one of those things. What are we dealing with? We don't know for sure. Is it global warming? Hugh Ross, our expert, says actually we're coming into a period of global cooling. But we need more research, but we certainly have been faced with terrible weather here in this country. And we're just going into the tornado season, so hold on to your hats.